Welcome to this podcast created by Newcastle University Business School, or NUBS for short. The Oxford Dictionary states that the nub of something is the central or essential point of a situation or problem. So we hope that in this series we can help you to get to the nubs of it. This podcast series looks at a key theme of value, the value of our creative economy, the value of our student experience, the value of our research, the value of our collaborative networks. In this series, you will meet academics, alumni, students, graduates, and professional staff of Newcastle University Business School as they talk about what value means to them. In this episode, join your host, Ashleigh King, as she speaks with Professor Matt Gorton and Dr Ian Merrell about the value of the rural enterprise. Professor Matt Gorton explores the relationship between marketing and agriculture, while Dr Ian Merrell looks at the role of the rural economy and the role of rural enterprise hubs in rural development. Okay, so in today's research episode, we're going to be focusing on rural enterprise, and I'm delighted to be joined by one of our academic researchers at Newcastle University Business School, Matt Gorton.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself? I'm sure you wear many different hats and have many different titles, but what you do and a bit about your background that you'd like to share with listeners.
Thank you. So I'm a professor in Newcastle University Business School in marketing, and my background is food marketing. So my research has been on agri-food markets and an interest also in the rural economy.
Excellent. And it's so funny because I was wondering where I knew your face from because it looked so familiar, and I've just remembered you probably taught me in my MBA. So I just graduated from my MBA in 2020. So I think that solves my conundrum that I was trying to run through my head. So that's great. So, I mean, one of the first things I want to ask you, Matt, is about your research, actually. What do you find in the work that you do in the rural economy research around that? What does the word agribusiness mean? How do the two industries link together?
Okay, so agribusiness for me is agri-food supply chain. So that's everything from the production on farm through the food industry and processing to include retail and final consumers. So it's thinking about the whole food supply chain. And most of that food supply chain is based in rural areas, particularly the agriculture side of it. So that there's an inherent link between the agri-food industry, agribusiness, and land use and farming, such as the rural economy.
So I'm curious then about the links between the agricultural sector and just the culture of that industry. So for instance, in many ways I would imagine, and this is where you can correct me if I'm wrong, that there's lots of, families who've farmed for generations or been involved in agriculture for a long time. And so I'm wondering, do you see many shifts in recent years in how that supply chain is changing, new trends, anything about that you want to comment on that you've noticed in your research?
Yeah, sure. So generally, the agri-food supply chain is becoming more concentrated. So there is a small number of players at the retail sector level, and also in processing, there's a large companies which dominate most sectors. But at the production level, the farm level, there's still a predominance of family farms. And they're quite small compared to the other actors within the food chain. So that's led to questions about whether they're in quite a vulnerable position, whether they face unfair trading practices. And that's informed a lot of my research. So it's trying to think about what's the future for small scale farms? How can they be viable economically going forward in a way in which is also sort of environmentally friendly and socially friendly as well?
That was one of my questions, actually, because I suspect I know that working at Newcastle University Business School, there is a large focus on sustainable development goals, corporate social responsibility, and all of these matters that are important to so many of us. And I'm curious about, how the agribusiness industry is approaching climate change and also some of the challenges around sustainability. So there is also the growing trend of veganism, of plant-based alternatives. And so with that as well, you have animals and livestock that maybe the demand may have changed and shifted. So I'm curious as well how much your research has adapted as well in terms of those trends.
Yeah, it's been looking at some of those trends and trying to understand ways in which we can cut carbon footprint from food supply chains. And most of that is, as you say, to do with ruminant meats. So it's things like beef and lamb, which are the main sources of carbon footprints. So we've done some work on school meals and looking at ways in which you can adapt the menu to try and shift it in a more sustainable and healthy way. So away from low cost processed meats, which often nutritionally aren't very good, to trying to switch towards a greater use of fruit and vegetables. But you need to be careful because a lot of schemes in that area have been a little bit naive. So they've just come in and said, let's give kids lots of broccoli and vegetables, and then it just all goes in the bin as food waste. So it's trying to design menus which both meet nutritional aims and also environmental aims, but also means that the children eat it as well, because otherwise everything's wasted.
Absolutely. And food waste is another huge wicked problem that we might have in our society to solve. So it's really interesting to hear that although there's been movements to change certain elements of how we eat and what we offer, it's not always what the end user wants, the child in that instance, or for us as consumers. So I think those are really interesting points. I'm also curious. One of the things that you've said as well about your research that really interests me is it touches so many different parts of society, actually, because you are looking at, what we eat, but also poverty, because, things like, well, what can we get for children in schools, and, what types of things can we offer to meet nutritional needs? Some of those children might not have access to certain meals at home. So it's actually very far reaching, the research that you're doing. At the same time, in terms of from a marketing perspective, how does that relate in? Because it's so interesting that I think a lot of the times when we have researchers at our business school, people can be surprised sometimes that they might be focusing on marketing, but it's, for instance, in this case, around a rural enterprise, or another guest is, working on animal welfare, but ethics, but it also works in accounting and finance. So can you tell us a little bit about the blend between disciplines that you involved in?
Yes, I mean, that's one of the things which I really love about the research which I'm involved in that it's interdisciplinary, because you're dealing with complex problems, as you said, or wicked problems. And insights from a single discipline isn't sufficient. There's a need to think about the consumer angle and consumer behavior, which marketers can talk to, but there's also a supply chain perspective. There's also a business issue. So you need your accountants and working out about returns and whether it's going to be a strong business case. So I think the issues which I look at, one of the things which I love about it is it brings together those different disciplines and different insights and working with people from a variety of backgrounds.
Absolutely. And how can your average person listening who could be from any part of or walk of life, they could be a prospective student, they could be a staff member or a researcher, or even someone in our local community, how can they start to learn more about where their food comes from, the flow of the consumer journey of food? Do you have any tips on learning more about some of these key issues?
Well, one of the interesting things which we've been doing is developing a MOOC which is the first time I've been involved in this. So a massive online course, which is trying to put the research findings in a sort of user-friendly, spend half an hour, work through small modules with videos and case studies for a general audience. So we've developed that, and if people are interested, if you go to Strength to Food, so that's strength, then the number 2 food.eu, and then there will be a link to the MOOC, and that's where if people are interested, then find out maybe more about the research which we've been doing.
Fabulous. Well, we can put that in our show notes and, on our website with this episode so people can find it easily. But I think it's really exciting, actually, the trend of massive online open courses, MOOCs, because it's such a nice way to learn more in a bite-sized way. But I also feel, from my personal perspective, universities have a duty to educate the communities and to add value to the society overall. And so what a great way to do that than, doing it through small bite-sized pieces like that. I think that's really wonderful to hear. Okay, so that's really helpful to know all of that. Are there any research findings or highlights that you want to flag or that you want to share that you have been surprised by or really excited about?
I think the main area which I've been focusing on recently is trying to think about development of markets for quality foods. So that's a way of producers getting more for what they do, so to try and get out of commodity markets, but also produce products which are sustainable environmentally and which there's a consumer demand for and would be nutritionally good. And one of the things which we've been doing is working with a retailer in Croatia. So a lot of people say that they want local foods and that they want food from their area. But when they go into the supermarket, often those concerns are forgotten. So they'll buy on price and habit and brands. So we did some work about just trying to think about how can you, at the point of decision making, make people remember that they're interested in local foods and remind them of the benefits of local foods. So we did a very simple thing in marketing terms. We had some point of sale materials in store, which just reminded people of the benefits of local foods. And that had a big impact on sales. So the local foods were competing against cheaper imported alternatives. And we found that with these point of sale materials, then the sales went up and we're able to track who was buying them, and it was across different consumer segments. So within consumer research, there's often what's known as a intention behavior gap. So people have intentions to do things, but they don't always carry them out. And that's always posed a problem to sort of quality foods and ethical consumption. And it's nice to know that just reminding people in store about their ethical concerns or these goals actually does have an effect on behavior. So that's something which we did, and it was nice to work with a retailer, do something on the ground, which I enjoyed thoroughly, and hope the retailer also benefited from it.
Absolutely. And I think as well, it's a wider conversation as well. Not just where we get our food, whether we buy it from a small independent store, if we get it plastic free, if we get it from the supermarket, who we choose to put our money towards, whether it's a small farmer in a delivery boxes, for instance, have gone through the roof where you can get direct from farm to table. Those are some brilliant ways of developing new ways of marketing as well. But I think as well, it also speaks of an issue around the global food industry. So for instance, your research, would you say that you focus mainly on a national or regional basis, or does it include a lot of international food markets as well?
So traditionally, our work's been done on a European level. So I did a lot of work which was funded by the European Union. So I'd say that I'm more European Union based, but I've also done a bit of work in Vietnam as well and Thailand. So looking at markets there and the future of wet markets.
Okay, because I was going to say that. Do you find any changes or differences or similarities with other communities or countries that you've worked in?
I think you find sort of similarities and differences. So culture plays a big impact on food. So that there are some cultures which have much more of a local or regional flavour to them than what's in the UK, and are much more invested in quality food products. Whereas I think in the UK we've had a more industrialised food sector, so much more concentrated, much more brand driven. Not a great deal of tradition of producers cooperating amongst themselves. So it's been a lot more sort of individual business focused rather than a sort of cooperative model.
Okay, that's really interesting. I think you're right. Food does play a huge part in people's lives and in culture. And I feel it would be remiss to not ask you what your favorite food is.
I think probably seafood. I think fresh seafood, which is cooked well, is fantastic. So some langoustines from North Shields are wonderful.
Oh, beautiful. And are you actually native to the region? Are you from the northeast of England?
No, I'm originally from the Midlands, but I've been in Newcastle now for 20 years.
I'm very similar time, but originally from South Africa. So I was curious about your love of seafood, if maybe you'd had that your whole life, or if it was more of a recent thing, being near the sea.
I think it's probably something I've always appreciated. And it's nice to go somewhere and have local fresh fish or seafood, and to go to different countries where you get different fish and specialities. I think that's wonderful, and it's something which is, distinct, but within the Northeast as well. That's something which the Northeast should be proud of.
Absolutely. We have got a beautiful space to be proud of, and I feel very fortunate to be adopted Geordie here as well alongside you. So thank you so much for your time. I do want to ask you if there is one word that you can use to describe Newcastle University Business School and what it means to you.
I think it's probably an inspiring environment. So we have some fantastic students. We have some fantastic staff as well. So it can make it such a great collaborative environment to work and study in.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Excellent. Thanks for coming in.
The business school is located at the gateway to Newcastle Helix, bringing together academia, the public sector, communities and businesses, providing unique opportunities for our students.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Ian. It's wonderful to have you here. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your research?
I can, yeah. So my name's Ian. I was born in Northumberland, tiny little village in the middle of nowhere. There were like 10 people in my year group at school. It was like really far out there. Always had a kind of passion for rural areas and helping to support them. And, I went through quite a typical route that someone growing up in the middle of nowhere would do, and, hit 18 and then just, get out of there and move to the city straight away. And then sort of like reflecting on that and seeing, how there is literally no young people in the village that I grew up, sort of wanting to help change some of those forces that are at play, let's say. So with that in mind, I went to do countryside management at Newcastle Uni at the Centre for Rural Economy. And then it just kind of snowballed from there, really, yeah.
So I'm guessing from what you're saying that becoming a researcher in academia, it wasn't your direct plan or path. It was more, get out of your small town, go and learn more about a big city, but also, study your course, but then wanting to go back and use those skills to change a little bit about your own community. Is that right?
Yeah, there's like an added sort of dynamic in there as well. I worked for 7 years in retail, and I just felt like the walls were closing in a little bit. So I went to uni to become a park ranger, and then kind of quickly realised that if you talk about philosophy when you're there, you get much better marks in your essays. And I happened to do philosophy at school, so I was just kind of like, this is like my place. This is where I want to be.
So you were a thinker and someone who was exploring ideas more and that sort of thing. I really like that. the reason I'm commenting on that is I'm always curious on how academics become academics. You know, what is it that helps them to find a passion that they care about so much, that they want to spend so much time learning and researching and writing about it and telling people about it. So it's really nice to hear a little bit of your journey. And so your research, I mean, what are you excited about with your research? Are there any findings you can tell us about, or some more about what you do?
Yeah, so I'm currently working at the National Innovation Centre for Rural Enterprise, which is quite a new initiative that's housed in the business school, which is looking at, there's lots of city-centric discourses around innovation and the idea of Silicon Valley or London or Singapore or any of these places being kind of tech hotspots, innovation hotspots. And all of that theory is very much applicable to urban areas where there's very high population densities and people can mingle and share ideas, share staff, resources and things like this. And then if you have a set of theories that are all geared up for people to be close together and interact and rub off each other, that isn't things that you would consider a rural area to have at all whatsoever. You know, everyone's very spread out. There's not as many businesses, you know, there's not as many quote unquote innovative businesses like, you know, tech startups or things that these discourses want us to study, basically. So that was kind of like the rationale for it, that, you know, there's plenty of innovation going on in rural areas. It's just that if you frame it in that certain way, it doesn't look very innovative at all. So the idea with the research was that there's these buildings and they're called rural enterprise hubs, and they basically co-locate businesses together. You know, if you've got like your typical kind of market town structure, they're kind of like hubs in the community anyway. So all of the farmers and people come into the market towns. So a lot of these places were set up in market towns, which wouldn't have any office accommodation if you were, you know, a startup business and you wanted some office accommodation, but also to have that sense of sort of relatedness and community that, you know, just going into work is useful for, as well as being able to network, you know, share new ideas, access business support, maybe even form a new collaboration with another tenant that was in there. So that was kind of the context of the research itself. The findings, I think, are particularly relevant since COVID hit as well. You know, I know that this is quite a topical thing that a lot of researchers want to talk about, but I think it's important in my case because I did the PhD from 2016 to 2019. And, you know, I would go and present it at conferences and people would just be like, we don't really get this. Like, well, what is this for? But since COVID's happened, everybody in the nation has pretty much experienced what it's like to sit at your kitchen table with dogs flying around, kids flying around all over the place, the phone's going off, you've got Zoom meetings going on, and just generally what a hit on your well-being and mental health that can be. And, you know, if you're setting up a rural business and there is no accommodation for 30 miles, let's say, the only option is I'm going to sit at my kitchen table and do it. And these rural businesses have been doing it for, you know, decades, and nobody's really sort of shone a light on that in the same way that the past year has. And, you know, there's now people all over the country, county councils and things like that, contacting me saying we want to set up co-working spaces or we want to set up hubs, because we've noticed, you know, there are several changing demographics and trends in this. You know, big companies who are in London, let's say, now realize that they don't have to have their entire workforce in the office every single day of the week, and, you know, they can commute one day a week maybe and then work at home a couple of days, maybe go to one of these enterprise hubs a couple of days. So in the past year it's kind of really shown why these are needed on like a well-being front, as well as the kind of business rationale for why they were set up in the first place.
I think that's fantastic that this is being looked into, because like you say, there are so many people who've been at their kitchen table doing this already, doing this work anyway. And so having the opportunity to think and reflect on that and, you know, look at ways to innovate and cross-collaborate And it is great to hear that there are opportunities to develop more of the market center type approach, that feeling, that hub, that, space. I think that idea of markets and being a center of a city or a space. So I'm thinking particularly of small towns in the northeast of England, like Berwick, not really northeast of England, that's more Scotland, or Barnard Castle in County Durham. These are small areas where they are small communities and they have a center and a hub. But I'm wondering, and this is a good question to ask you because you grew up in a small village or a small area, but do you feel that there might be anything lost if we move forward too much? So your village, for instance, if it became a hub of activity and there were so many things for young people to do and it retained some of its young people and there was a reason for them to stay, that would be great. But at the same time, is there any risk of losing certain values in small towns or cultural issues and not cultural issues, parts that make that community happy or enjoy that space? I'm just wondering if this is something that comes up in your research and when you talk to people and when you talk to different people in agriculture or other communities who are wanting to have change and innovation, but also wanting to retain some of their culture and values and traditions. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so a couple of things come to mind. First of all, in England or in the UK, let's say, we have a very different demographic, a different sort of trend to the rest of the world in the sense that there's a big counter-urbanization movement of people who get fed up with the city and move to the countryside for the good life or the rural idyll or whatever it might be. Whereas in most of Europe and most of the developing world, there's basically so few opportunities in rural areas that you have to move into the city. So there's big urbanizing movements. And, I think that there is a risk in England in particular of all of these places, because of this counter-urbanization movement, of them becoming very gentrified very quickly. And, we hear all of the time about stories about like second home ownership in the countryside and how all of these rich people are forcing locals out because, they've got a house in London and then they've got a house in Cornwall or wherever it might be. So I think that there is a risk there that, we sort of have these like urban cultures and urban attitudes moving into the countryside that might rub up against each other a little bit. But on that note, another idea that sprung to my mind then was that there are very distinct characteristics of rural areas that could be sold on a kind of regional or international scale, of this idea of like cultural heritage and things being produced in the countryside are sometimes deemed to be like more kind of artisan and like higher quality than somewhere that's like mass produced. So I think that there is potential there for people to form new innovative businesses around, like culture and heritage and the landscape as well.
It's a really interesting contradiction, that whole idea of, is it that it's different in terms of the quality of being higher, quality being out in the country, being more artisanal, as you said, organic food, all of those different elements. And I think as well with shifts with things like the British exit from the EU, so the Brexit, there is also a desire in many communities to want to buy local, to want to buy from within their country as well, which I think is interesting. It's really great to hear about some of the research that you're doing and, the communities that you're working in and some of the opportunities that are coming up. I would like to thank you for your time and also ask if there's anything that you would like to share with anyone listening on how they can find out more about you. We will have some show notes so we can share links and things like that. But if someone were to want to learn more about your research or read any of your papers, is there any resources that you wanted to point out?
Well, I think that the best place would probably be the National Innovation Centre for Rural Enterprises website and Twitter feed. That's where we're kind of based at the minute, and there is a really interesting set of projects being developed there, and lots of projects that are like really applicable to the real world as well, and not just kind of, you know, sat up in the ivory tower and nothing ever gets done about them. So we are actually working with rural businesses to come up with new sort of innovative ideas. Myself personally, the papers are on the horizon. Yeah, it's been quite a long process to get them into the peer review, but they're coming, I would say, in the next few months.
Well, we'll make sure we put those in the show notes as well, and well done on all the hard work it's taken to get there. I am not a academic researcher, but I can only imagine the work that's gone into the checks and the writing all hours of the night. One of the last questions I wanted to ask you is, since you are you've lived in the country and you've also done work in communities, would you say town mouse or country mouse? Do you have any thoughts on that? Any preference?
I think that I would probably say country mouse, but have, you know, come and learn the experience as well of what it's like to live in a city. Yeah. And
I think as well, there is that real innovation and trend for as well, you know, food that we can grow in our cities. And, you know, in the northeast of England, in Newcastle, we have the Oosburn Farm, for instance. It's a city-based farm. They're doing amazing work with local communities. And I think one of the challenges when we have rural spaces is for both the rural spaces, but also sometimes in the city, that lack of transport can be a challenge to go and learn about another place.
Yeah.
And so for some of our marginalised communities and hard to reach communities in the northeast of England, having city-based farms and city-based rural spaces is really powerful as well. So it's nice to have things like that too.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the massive potential in like vertical farming, aquaponics, and yeah, you know, designing green spaces in urban areas as well for, you know, well-being or whatever it might be. But yeah, I agree. I think that there needs to be elements of the countryside brought into the city as well, because not everyone can, like you say, access it. And, you know, you look at statistics on national parks and national trust sites and like the demographics that are going on there, you know, there's very apparent that there's certain areas, certain sections of the population that can't or don't access them for some reason. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, those are all my questions. So I just wanted to ask in one word, what does this research mean to you?
One word. That's a tough one. Like passion.
I like that. And I'm sure that writing papers and doing all of the work that you're doing wouldn't be possible without passion. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your feedback. You can drop us a line at nubspodcast@newcastle.ac.uk. And you can also tag us in any of our Newcastle University Business School social media channels. You can find these links in our show notes. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share with your friends. This podcast has been brought to you by Newcastle University Business School. Your host has been Ashleigh King, with executive production by Ashleigh King, photography by Paul Scurra of That Branding Company and Blind Sea Photo. Production by Alice Smith and Tim Lazinski at TL Multimedia Limited.